Hi there. What I'm going to try and do today is replace two belts on a 1985 CJ7. This one has two separate belts, one for the alternator and one for the power steering pump. I didn't see any videos online, maybe because it's a really simple job and most people know how to do it, I'm not sure. But one would have helped me, so that's why I'm doing this one. You'll have to excuse my amateur video making. But the first thing I'm going to do is to remove this belt here. And you do that by, there are only two bolts you need to deal with. The first one is, let's see that with the sun, okay, so this is the first one you're going to need to loosen. And once that is loosened, you can loosen this belt here on the top of the alternator, and that will make the belt loose for removal. So I went ahead and loosened this nut. You'll need a wrench to go on there because that will spin. For whatever reason, these seem to be a mix and match of millimeter and standard. I was able to put a 14 on there, but this one up top took a ½ inch. Okay, so now we're ready to slide this alternator. You can just push on it. It should slide down like that, and then your belt should slide right off, especially if it's super old and really worn. Okay, so for this second belt, which is attached to the power steering pump, you'll see that there are a lot of bolts. You can ignore most of those. The only three that we need to concentrate on are this one right here, and there's one directly opposite. You can't really see it in this video, but there's one right here, and the third one will be this through bolt right here. As you see, it goes all the way through. So we just need to loosen this one, and this one over here, and then after you have those loosened, there is a hole right here. Sorry about that. Right there. So that fits a ½ inch drive, breaker bar, or socket wrench, and that will enable us to move this whole unit will swing back and forth. So I've gone ahead and loosened this bolt, and again, it's kind of a weird mixture. This was a 15 millimeter. This was a 14, the one that goes through, and this one behind this little bracket was also a 14. So I have my socket wrench in that receptor. I don't know what you want to call it, but anyway, that gives you a chance to move the whole unit where you want it, and I want it down. So that's the loose position. So as you can see, it's quite loose now. Okay, so what I did was in order to loosen this up, this belt up enough to get it off the pulley easily without prying it. I suppose you could cut this or pry it off with a screwdriver or whatever, but remember, you're going to have to get the new one back on there, and they don't recommend prying them on there, so that you're going to want to be able to get that to a point where it comes off easily. So what I did was I took out this bolt fully. That's going to be tricky because there's just enough space for that bolt to come out of there, so getting that back in will be a challenge. And then I took this one out over here as well. This one's a 14 for some reason, and this one is a 15. So I don't know. What that does though is it gives us enough space in order to get this belt off with relative ease. So this little guy right here, in order to get that back on there, what I had to do was do this one first, and you kind of have to manipulate the pump up and down as you put that in there. You're just gonna have to experiment with it. Good luck on that part. Once you get it, it should be fairly easy, straightforward. And we are back, or I'm back rather. The parts store gave me the wrong belt, so I had to go down and exchange it for the right one. So now that I have the right size belt, this should go on fairly easily. And there we go. We have both belts on there. The next thing I'm going to do is to tighten this up, and that bolt underneath that we've already looked at. The manual says that you're going to want about 1/4 inch of play in the belt itself. There is a special tool for that, which I don't have. I typically just use a pull tape or a ruler and just kind of eyeball it. So the belts are replaced and they're adjusted to within 1/4 inch of play, as the shop manual suggested. The shop manual also suggested that you let it run for about 5 minutes, recheck the belts, and then adjust them as necessary. There was one last thing I forgot to mention, and that is, whatever you do, do not over tighten these belts. If you do, you can ruin your bearings, so just be mindful of that. I thought a review, a kind of wrap up, might be useful. Again, this is a 1985 Jeep CJ7. It's an inline 6. It's a 258. It has power steering with no air conditioning. It has 2 belts, the one for the alternator, and the 2 belts you have to wrestle with are this adjuster bolt here, and the one we made mention of earlier, this nut and bolt here. Those are the only 2 you need to worry about on that side. And on the power steering pump side, you can see there are a bunch of bolts here, up here as well, but the only 3 you have to deal with are this one here, the one directly opposite, and this through bolt right here. What I did learn is that in order to get enough slack on this belt, I had to remove these 2 bolts in order to get this to swing freely enough where that belt would come off there easily. For future reference, when you want to adjust this belt, there is this receptacle here, which takes a 1/2 inch socket or breaker bar. So when you loosen up those 3 bolts, you can make adjustments on that more easily. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Thank you for watching.